Everybody, it is my honor. You know, we work really hard getting these really good interviews, hanging out, vibing with people. And I had to reach far and wide to do this one. He's multi-talented. He's an artist. He's an activist. He's everywhere you look on the internet. Ladies and gentlemen, Machine Gun Kelly is in the studio. What's up, Hawk? How you doing?
Oh man, that was good. That was the best intro yet.
How's it go? What's going on in your world right now as we speak? What's in the news?
Well, in the news,
just your personal news, the awkward times,
marriage strife, too many kids and pets. You know,
how long have you been married?
7 years, 6 years. Woo! 6 years, yeah. 6 years, August. Yeah, and 2 kids came along with it.
That's just excellent timing.
Yeah, they're the best part.
You say it ruefully. You're like, they're the best part.
No, I mean, I say it hesitating, like not like my wife is going to watch this, but you know.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Yeah. So you know, just juggling day-to-day stuff with trying to remain active and pushing the cause for abolition and for justice in all cases throughout this country. You know, and honestly, just doing what I can to kind of amplify certain stories and certain messages, and following up on the 10 Demand song that I did with Jesse Jett. He produced and sung on that song. We're working on some more stuff, so maybe an album on the way, which is a lot new for me. I haven't made a full album since 2014. So
we've got a lot going on. In addition to Leslie also being in the building. Hey, Leslie, how you doing?
I'm good.
Molly is also here. Molly Politics. Y'all can watch her on her Politics YouTube channel. She publishes new things semi-regularly. How you doing, Molly?
Semi-regularly. I'm doing pretty good. How are y'all?
We're rock solid. Y'all's president is about to die. Like I really don't know if he's going to make it to election day. He posted yesterday this Avengers music video of him getting off of the thing, the chopper, and turning around, and he's saluting the chopper, and the Marines saluting back in a slow. And I feel like someone's going to intercut that with video of the funeral. Like he's in extreme danger. Leslie, when you came here and you talked and you said, you know, anything is possible. I believe in redemption. If this fella Trump comes out the hospital and he says, I've seen the light and I've changed, you know, and COVID is real. Wear a mask. Please take care of yourself. Weed should be legal now. Everybody get high. I've seen the universe. It feels like that's not happening.
that didn't happen.
No.
And it's funny. I just came back from hanging out with my pops. My pops is my stepdad, and he's 94. He's a Navy veteran. And we were watching the scene on CNN when he was saluting, and that just tickled my pops to no end. He's like, look at him. He's saluting like he's ever been in the military, like he knows what he's doing. My pops just found that the most amusing thing ever. And then he called him a son of a bitch. So, you know.
He's like a baby. He's like a little baby.
I feel like the only way he was going to come out of it changed is if like the hypoxia just happened to kill off the parts of his brain that make him an insufferable asshole.
Yeah, I think we're not looking for COVID. We're looking for LSD for that kind of personality transformation.
I had another epiphany about him. I think Trump is like that kid in school that thinks he's going to ace the entire class if he does one extra credit project, and badly at that. That's Trump.
How have you been dealing with the last 5 days from this dude getting the disease to being checked in to everyone thinking he was going to die? Now he's out of the hospital. He's clearly he's clearly high on something. Like they pumped him full of the world's strongest steroids, and he's gonna crash like it's Tuesday, like Thursday. So how do you feel right now in this moment?
Honestly, I think it's more than anything, it's another distraction. You know, there are so many real issues in this country. You know, even if you want to talk about other Trump-related issues, the fact that he didn't pay taxes for like 10 years in a row, that's out of the news cycle. You know, the concentration camp, you know, evil doctor who's removing reproductive organs without permission from immigrants, that went out, you know, the news cycle. So, I mean, if he has it, it's almost convenient. If he doesn't, it's like not that surprising. I mean, he's always looked unhealthy to me. He continues to look unhealthy. He's always behaved erratically. He's continuing to behave erratically. To me, it's like none of this is really that interesting to me. I mean, his stance on like everything is predictable. Like, you know, it's like, of course he's healed in 3 days. And of course his response is, don't worry about COVID. And of course he like managed to make it this like misogynist, like, you know, patriarchal thing where it was like, you know, like you don't be a victim, like, you know, be strong and fight it. Like just I don't even know how to explain that. Like, but like every single possible thing that has come of this is not really, you know, doesn't really spike my interest. Like, you know, I wouldn't be disappointed if he died. He doesn't want me to live, certainly. I mean, you know, he and Andy, you know, the fake journalist in Portland, I'm sure talk about me and the DA of Portland and how we're both Antifa, you know, militants and terrorists. So like, I'm not concerned for him at all. I'm concerned for the regular people around him. Although I don't have much sympathy for Secret Service specifically, but like janitors, his nurses, I mean, things like that, like working class people who aren't cops, like they're suffering from his stupidity and, you know, his arrogance, you know?
Yeah. I mean, he's a bad guy. We were talking about this, I guess yesterday, like that little presidential motorcade he went on where the vehicle he was in was literally hermetically sealed to protect against gas, which means also none of the air was going out. So literally everybody in that vehicle with him just has it now. There's no way you don't when you're in that kind of close quarters. And one of the people is like at the peak of the virus actively shedding at all times. Like that's literally a worst case scenario for exposure.
Yeah. Although I will say, like, I did enjoy watching the Rose Garden massacre. I mean, just seeing just like the flippancy with which they live their lives, all these soulless Republicans all hugging and kissing and shaking hands. I mean, just passing this disease around to each other. It was amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think it's poetic justice.
Yeah, they're the anti-maskers, so.
And isn't it that like there is a latency phase? Well, is it latency? There is like a calm down phase of the virus after you initially get it and start showing symptoms.
That's
like
great.
after 4 or 5 days, you start to plateau and like feel better, but then it gets just worse from there. So it's just kind of like, it's not even that he's healed, it's that he's actively trying to hide the fact that he's a lot more severe than he is. Especially, to be completely honest, he's going to be heading back to the hospital probably in like 2-3 days with severe breathing problems, completely, you know, cut off from his airways, and he might just die in the hospital. I'm going to be real.
My assumption is that they fitted the White House with the kind of medical equipment necessary to take care of him when that happens. Like, I assume that's part of what they were doing while he was, you know, hospitalized, but I don't know. I mean, I think because we live in a hell world, what's going to happen is he's going to be fine and he's going to tell everybody how fine it is, and it's going to make things so much worse and way more people are going to die. Because I'm just a doomer at this point.
Yeah,
I believe the worst thing will always happen.
I'm in
I mean, that is
out.
the general feeling.
Well, he couldn't breathe
I think,
standing on the riser. He couldn't breathe well. You could see that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. But when he dies, right, like it's going to be worse because he's a martyr, and like the fervency of his following will only increase.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't
think,
know. I mean, I think probably they would resolve the cognitive dissonance of him dying of COVID with, like, the Q crowd will definitely think of him as a martyr. But I think that there's like a large majority of Republicans who are not also Q Republicans who will probably just see it as an example of like an extremely like sad, tragic irony kind of thing. Like they'll see it as noble, but not necessarily orchestrated.
They will tout his age and his weight and his heart issues that they pretend aren't there now. But if he dies, they'll say, well, he had these underlying conditions, because people are still arguing that online right now. Well, it's only like 0.005% that die. Okay, but if one of those 0.005 is one of your family members or you, that matters.
You know, I am not somebody who predicts
It's just like
the worst.
the Republican Party is just filled with Chekhov's guns and red herrings.
They have the occasional straw man too.
Yeah, and so are the Democrats. Let's be honest.
Yeah, but I mean, this is just. I think this is a unique world historical event, and I think that this is just one of the weirdest, most ironic, most wild things that's ever happened, at least in like the last 100 years. Just as in terms of major things that are happening to world leaders. This guy getting a bug from a pandemic. That
specifically, yeah,
of course,
yeah,
it's almost like a
pandemic.
It's like poetry. It's like a stage play.
Yeah, in that sense, yeah, like that's a really good point. You know, like it is as much as I like don't personally care. It's like it's definitely a monumental historical moment given his denial of its existence. Then like how he's saying it's going to be 15 cases, and then like continuing to say don't wear a mask and attacking any person who, you know, in leadership who suggests doing otherwise. Then for him to get it is definitely poetic justice. Yeah, for sure.
Also, can we take a second and pull
Classic
over
Shakespearean tragedy.
Right, absolutely. Can we also take a second and pull over and talk about all of the like liberal figureheads who have been falling all over themselves to wish him well now?
That is the worst part, man.
The same people who have been telling us that if we don't actively vote for Joe Biden, we don't care if people die, are now actively wishing for this man to survive his own personally orchestrated hell.
Yeah.
And they don't see like,
well, they're all boot chokers. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
And they have to, you know, do what the political thing is to do. You have to send your hopes and prayers. It doesn't mean shit. Like it never means shit. You know what I mean?
I think you have to, though.
No, I agree. But that's what their thinking is.
Well, yeah, and I mean they have a very like sort of snooty superior morality about them, right? And it's entirely facile, but it is something that they personally believe in as like a code. And I get it. They're like Aaron Sorkin wannabes. Like it's a perfect microcosm in the form of like one pop culture like administration that broke all of their minds forever. But I think it also speaks to kind of a deeper moral cowardice. You know, people are not often willing to take the things they say all the way to their conclusions, you know? And if you are saying that like some of the times you have to think about how many people are going to die if you do or do not act, like, yeah, more people are going to die if he lives. It's going to be way worse if he continues to be alive and then like gets over this.
I'm going to go in a different route, and I'm probably going to get myself canceled by saying this, but I get the thought process of trying to be civil, because good God, what we've got going now. And I understand the whole vote blue, no matter who people are talking about civility more so than anybody else. And usually I would tell them to kiss my ass. But right now, we're all just so tired. We're so tired of all the nastiness and all the vitriol and all the screaming and all the yelling. So I don't mind them. They're not wishing him. They're not giving him well wishes. They're just hoping he doesn't die. I don't have a problem with people saying, I mean, we've all said it here, and I don't know if we're doing it because we don't want to get canceled by Twitter or Facebook because we're not allowed to say that we hope he dies. But I honestly don't hope he dies, and I hope that no one else hope he dies.
Yeah, I mean, I don't hope anyone dies, and I agree with you about redemption being possible for anybody. You kind of have to think that way if you're an abolitionist, but I totally cancel you anyway because I think without this vitriol, without this anger, we're not going to get anywhere. No,
I agree. I totally agree. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying stop fighting the fight. That's not what I'm saying. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
I know.
You can fight the fight. You can fight the fight and go, you know what? It sucks that he got this. And you can call him out on how he got it and that it's his fault. That's not being a dick by pointing out what he's done wrong to put himself in this position. That doesn't mean I can't say, you know what? I hope he gets better.
Well, it comes down to whether or not you see Donald Trump as the problem or the system itself as the problem.
Or both. Yeah.
Well, I think they're both a problem.
Yeah.
So here is why I do actually hope.
A lot of people, I think a lot of people are like treating Donald Trump as the big issue here, so they're celebrating his death as some sort of victory for people overall.
Change anything. If
and
dies,
I don't want Donald Trump to die. He's just an asshole who's the arbiter of everything I hate about capitalism.
Right.
So here is why I actually do want COVID to take him. I believe two things. One, if he lives, it is extremely dangerous. It is extremely, extremely dangerous. We are going to see transmission of it go way up, way more than we would have expected it to if he had not gotten it at all, or if he gets it and dies, right? That's one of the reasons. The other reason is there is utility to a parable. Like, we have use of parables in society. And this is a parable if ever I have encountered one, right? This man who, in his pride and arrogance, managed to create an otherwise avoidable pandemic that he himself was killed by will completely ruin the entire, really Republican Party, frankly. It can be used to ruin them by making them a laughing stock. And that doesn't happen unless he dies. So when we talk about, net good,
right.
It is outweighed by him surviving by a lot. And ultimately, I want the most people to be the most okay.
Do you know what book is read by everybody and has lots of parables about ethical behavior? The Bible. Do you know what Trump supporters don't read, listen to, or obey? The Bible. So if we feel like that book filled with parables hasn't solved our societal problems, I don't know if having Donald Trump as a living parable right now is going to connect people. I feel like evil is going to be on the march no matter what. Whether it's got to step over somebody, take a nice long step, it'll step over you like AI stepping over Ty Lue. It'll get where it's got to go. So I think when Trump dies, people will be like, whoops.
Hear me out. The Bible is just really out of touch in terms of references.
I just don't think Trump is as big of a player sometimes as people like to make it out.
Right. Well, so the Bible, though, is very explicitly about old weird shit from thousands of years ago that nobody can relate to. So what we need to do is we need to update the Bible, actually.
Okay,
we need to do a cool teen Bible that has updated metaphors specifically for boomers.
Right. They have those.
Well, I have good news.
We can have Aaron Sorkin write it. It'll be great. It'll work perfectly.
I have good news. I have some magical golden tablets that were given to me by God. No one is allowed to see them, but I can read them, and I will tell you what they say. So I got it.
This is excellent. Listen, I know you've mentioned being militantly apathetic to this entire psychodrama. So let's talk about something that you are more passionate about. You have been in and around a lot of social justice organizations. I don't know whether you call United Left a social justice organization. That and 10 Demands, they both are organizations, and you've got central roles in both of them. So can you talk a little bit about how do you start a group like that, and what have you learned, and what was your history that led you up to doing stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, those two were the first in my lifetime or my personal life that, started online. So that is unique also. But although there are similar things that work and don't work, whether you're doing it online or in person. Also, I should say that I have background on United Left from having been part of the initial conversations that sparked its creation. But I am at this time, I've never had an official title. And I help with communications, but I wouldn't consider myself like central in the way that with 10 Demands, I'm part of a really small group that put these 10 demands together and works on a daily basis together. So just for any confusion there, I mean, throughout my life, to me, the most important thing is alignment on mission. If understanding what that primary mission is, and then what the sub requirements are, what there is that is necessary to do to reach that mission, that goal. And honestly, other than that, I think the most critical thing is the way the organization is like organized, structured, the way meetings are held, the importance of preventing certain individuals from grabbing and holding on to too much power, and particularly white people, and particularly men. And so as a Jewish white guy, straight white guy, that's something that I'm actively working on at all times to make sure that even if I have a lot of information about something, even if I have lived experience, even if I've been there from the beginning, even if I've been given a title, not speaking over people, not trying to speak for other people, things like that. I've seen, really well-intended organizations with all kinds of different missions falter because of too much power in only a couple people's hands. In fact, when I was the co-director of the student activist union at Vassar College, I ran into that myself, where there was actually a meeting held that I thought was really done in a safe and productive way, where the men and the women were separated, and it was kind of like this circular situation where people could voice their experiences, because I and a couple other people who had been given these leadership roles and were asked, were given, like, the group didn't start with me, so there were structures in place before I was given this title. And so in this position, you lead the meetings, but it got to the point where not enough voices were being heard. And when I was in my late teens, early 20s, I was not informed or experienced enough to recognize that, and nor were the other people in charge. So it was presented to us in this manner where we were able to see the ways that we were kind of limiting our effectiveness by not incorporating all of the voices that, deserve to be heard. And so I'll never forget that experience. And I've witnessed it many times since, although, I have not, outside of, Twitter warriors, keyboard militants who trash me about things that aren't true, I've never experienced in groups after that time people telling me from their own experiences that I have repeated that. But I've seen it happen by other people. And, I think that's really the key, no matter whether it's online or off, or what the intention of the group or organization is.
Does anybody want to riff on that? If not, then maybe we can come back to it later. What is your daily weekly workflow? Like, what is it? I'm trying to think of how can we make this of something that's of utility to people who are watching it, and maybe they've kind of seen you online and they're thinking, well, how can I get my own local activist group similar kind of profile in our own neighborhood? So what do you guys do on a daily or weekly basis to kind of spread the mission?
I mean, I think it definitely depends on the type of organization. If we're talking about a local organization, I think one of the key things is, leveraging, as much as I hate Facebook, even local Facebook groups, and like other methods that people now with COVID are congregating online. Otherwise, it would be like going into your town or your city, connecting with like-minded people, going to meetings of other groups, and like without overpowering that group, in off moments, sharing information about what you're trying to get done. Because local is local. So you need to connect with people who are right there, going through the same thing and wanting the same localized agenda. I've typically not worked on hyper local issues, outside of my time, in Poughkeepsie, New York, where I shouldn't say that. Like the ways that I've worked in local situations were, working at soup kitchens, working at teen centers, working at alternative to incarceration centers, but not in like, let's say, a local DSA chapter. Like I don't have that experience, but, in a group like 10 Demands where we are trying to implement real substantive change to, repeal certain laws, to pass other laws, to influence leaders across jurisdictions at the local, state, and national level. Our mechanisms have included doing interviews like this so that we can amplify our message to, for example, in this case, your audience. Before, another thing we did was print flyers and distribute them to protesters. One of the reasons Seattle has been more effective than other cities in their protest movement was that they've had specific demands that have been in place from the beginning. And while those are local demands, we believe that the 10 demands can be, implemented locally, nationally, at the state level, across the country. So these are demands that can, fill that service for protesters who are out there knowing that they're sick and tired of, people of color being killed. They're sick and tired of mass incarceration, of, having to keep their phone on them because they're about to get stopped and frisked whenever they leave the house, but don't know what they want instead, don't know what the alternative is. We're also in the midst of an email campaign, which we're going to share with people so that they can follow up and email their leaders as well. But developing, putting together a list of the contact information of all of the people who are decision makers and putting those 10 demands in front of them and showing them not only the demands, but giving them real details on places where aspects of this have worked before, as well as the alternative, abolitionist society that we envision, how it can actually work, and putting data and stats behind it. Before we even started, we started with this mission, we started with this need. And then as we were putting together the 10 demands, we were also putting together our branding. When it comes to marketing, it's no different than marketing a company or a nonprofit. If you want to get your message out there, you have to have consistent messaging and you have to have a consistent look and feel. So we made sure that we had a website that was, graphically, appealing, that stood out. And, we leveraged this, guide, our graphics and marketing style guide for all of our marketing materials. So all of the social media thumbnails that we use, for all of our Twitter storms, we've try to engage as many people as possible during a specific time period with a specific hashtag, providing all that stuff to people with specific messaging and specific background information, so that it's readily available to anyone who wants to share it. As far as day to day, we're continually, building this email list. We're continually trying to get more people to sign the petition, to get more donations so that we can give more money to Black Lives Matter and the movement for Black Lives, and print more flyers, and just promoting on social media. Anytime there is another killing, anytime there's more data released, anytime any information is newly available to us, we put that in the context of the abolitionist philosophy.
So, at the risk of swerving a little too hard into like identity politics, which I'm hoping not to do, I know like amplifying like Black issues to white audiences is very important, but I wonder, like, to what extent are you applying that to like Black voices and Black people? Like, if you're the one who's center stage in this, like, who isn't,
Yeah, absolutely. And that is a question that I've received before. I think we all know that. It's also, not a question that most interviewers are like brave enough to ask, because it's like, it's pushing me, and I appreciate that. Yeah, gently, but
hopefully in a constructive way.
Absolutely. It's a really important question. And it goes back to what I was saying about trying not to speak for or over other people. This was a conscious choice made within the group. I'm the only white person in the group, and I'm Jewish and have experienced a ton of anti-Semitism. And that's what kind of led me to this life mission, was my connection to other oppressed peoples. As a public figure, as someone who's been interviewed as a hip hop artist for, more than 15 years, and as a 20-year abolitionist who knows the language and is really familiar talking about it and comfortable speaking to audiences, the group decided that I should be the one to do this. Nick, who's a Black man who's part of 10 Demands, did a video breaking down the 10 Demands. And, that video from someone who is more directly impacted by this on a daily basis is featured more prominently on our About page than any of the interviews I've done. Mm-hmm. And, I've actually invited Nick to join me, as well as Patrona, a Black woman, to join me on a future interview I'm doing with a journalist, Justin Hunt, who does like hip hop and Black culture stuff. A lot of it has to do with my comfortability, and up to this point, everyone else's unwillingness to take that position. And other parts of it is my being the one who has dedicated the time to doing the outreach and leveraging my connections. I also know a lot more people who do these interviews. So more recently, I've been more, sorry about the dogs. More recently,
we have all the time. We've got people's kids, people's dogs. Like, this is extremely normal for our show.
Cool,
so don't worry about it. Yeah, exactly.
But more recently, I've been pushing harder, which is to get other voices. Holy shit. To get other voices to be visible, and not just behind the scenes. Because I am one of about 10 people who put these demands together. I'm one of about 10 people who is in our DM group talking about these issues every day, and one of about 10 people who is tweeting from our 10 Demands Twitter account. So I'm pushing them and hoping that they'll at least join me, and the more comfortable they get, the more they'll do their own outreach and take it upon themselves to speak about it. But I do my best to try to speak on behalf of 10 Demands when it's appropriate, to speak on behalf of myself when it's appropriate, and to call out when I refer to the inclusion of so much on the rights and I guess the rights would be the most appropriate word for the First Nations, for Indigenous people. That is directly the result of Cheyenne, who's an Indigenous woman who has connections in that world, who, brought that to us. When it comes to reparations being included, that's one of the key differentiators in our demands from those of other abolitionist groups. And that came directly from conversations that Patrona had. I also refer very often to the Black feminist women in my interviews who have preceded me, like Angela Davis and Maryam Kaba, and we have a resources page on the 10 Demands site that goes and on Twitter I'll suggest you're only going to get so much from hearing from me. Or reading my tweets. Go to our resources page. There are people who have more experience, more lived experience, who are more closely impacted by this every day, who've written extensively about this in a far smarter way than I could. So refer there. Start with Our Prison's Obsolete by Angela Davis and go from there.
I have certainly recommended specifically that text a lot of times. So I mean, that's a great place to start, I think, for any kind of abolition discussion.
Yeah.
You haven't just done things like that on, social media. You're also a music artist. You've been a hip hop artist for, you said, like 15 years. You've done songs about stuff like social issues. You've got a music video that was kind of rolled out as part of one of the tweet storms that you guys have done. It's a very rough, harsh, disturbing video. Can you talk about the process of putting it together, how the concept came together, and to what degree you felt uncomfortable watching it?
Yeah. I don't think I'm the right one to answer this larger question of whether we should be sharing videos of police brutality.
I mean, you just did a music video that was all police brutality. So if you're not equipped to if you don't want to answer that question, that seems like something to anticipate before the video is released.
No, that's not what I'm saying. Okay. I should not be the one with the answer. I'm talking about I should not be dictating for our movement or for society whether that should be done. I personally stand clearly, based on what you just said, in the camp that the things that are most upsetting to us are the most likely to inspire us to force change and are most likely to change some minds. So as someone who, is not Black or brown, who has a ton of Black and brown friends, but doesn't have, a predominance of Black and brown family, it shouldn't really be my place to say that, we should or shouldn't show this stuff. I've seen people of color, particularly Black people, say that we should, and I've seen those that have said we shouldn't. If there is a decision made somehow where it represents every single Black person in America, and that decision is to not show it, then clearly I'm going to defer at that point. And I have made strides, for example, on Juneteenth, instead of focusing on brutality, focusing on positive things, Black people just living life, with their families, humanizing people who are often dehumanized in our society. But yes, of course it disturbs me. My music is often disturbing. My song about rape, where I include interviews with rape survivors as the chorus, the producer told me he had a really hard time doing the song with me. Most of my music, the music that is overtly political, is not enjoyable. Probably it can be entertaining as it's educational and empowering and inspiring, but it is not easy listening by any means, nor is my form of hip hop at all. The way that I rap is not easy listening. To me, as someone who has always used hip hop for the purposes of expressing feelings about injustice and methods for, making positive change, it seemed beyond fitting to do the same for an issue that means so much to me, and one that I've, already kind of touched on in my music. I had a song years ago called "Throw Away the Key" that was a more traditional music video where, I was rapping in front of an NYPD station, and, in front of a precinct and elsewhere in New York City. And I hired a friend of mine, to play, and I hired some people to play cops. And, he acted out like the life of a Black person, in our city, where he's walking down the street and gets stopped and frisked with guns drawn for just leaving a convenience store. Whereas in this video, I'm snorting cocaine on the side of the street and they just walk by. But interspersed with all of that is a lot of prison and police brutality footage. And this was kind of a new version of that, where I took myself out completely. I'm in it for a split second based on, a reference in the song to revolutionary rap. Otherwise, I'm not in it at all. It's just a stream of this difficult footage that is, the backdrop or the forefront of this soundtrack, where I go into detail about what society is like today with our criminal injustice system. And then I end on an equally aggressive but more positive note, where I break down the 10 demands and the ways to actually create this alternative society.
Given that, as someone who's clearly very thoughtful about this and has a lot of interactions with people, knowing that it's like a 50-50 thing, why would you specifically feel like you wanted to tackle something that's such a raw nerve? And Molly also asked this, and this is maybe an extra side question. Do you feel like, because we as a society have seen so many of these images before, do you feel like they have the jarring effect that you're going for? Or do you feel like society is more desensitized, or that we need more violent images to make us consider social messages? Just kind of go through that with us.
Yeah. I'm not sure if it's 50-50. I have no idea. Honestly, I've seen, if I had to guess, actually, I don't even want to guess, but I'll tell you what I've seen. I've seen more people sharing the footage than I've seen people saying we need to stop sharing it. That could just be what's come across my eyes, though. I've never done like a formal study on this. In terms of it being my right or my place to share it, if people think that it's not, then I have to sit with that. You know what I mean? This isn't new. This is something I've been doing my whole life. I've put myself outside of hip hop. I put myself in physical danger, protesting, leading protests and direct actions for decades, and not prioritizing my own finances or my own health. I've never taken a profit for my music, and so for me, it made total sense to provide footage to go along with the message and the imagery of the song. I think that it is still jarring. I also think we are certainly desensitized. I think we're not fully desensitized. And I also think that when it comes to sharing this stuff, if it's just a video, it can only go so far. If it's a video with a story where you're hearing that this person not only was shot and killed by a cop unarmed, but here's who this person is, here's who the human is, it's harder to watch. It means more when you know that person. And I also think that when there are words through music, through rap, I think that it also adds additional power to just to raw footage. Martin Luther King said music is the soul of a movement. And I really believe that. I believe that, you know, my music has been used at protests. My music has been used in classrooms as part of educational, you know, plans. And I really believe it adds a lot of value. People who don't necessarily learn in a traditional manner from reading the news are going to get something out of a music video that they, you know, they might not otherwise. And when people who don't really grasp, you know, when someone is rapping really fast and they're not following along with the lyrics, they're not necessarily going to get the full message or the, you know, the full imagery that they would if there's a video that goes along with it. And that's also why I worked, you know, really hard with Vozable, who made the video, to make sure that he, you know, tried his best to put images and video and pieces of video that corresponded with the actual lyrics. So it wasn't just this arbitrary stream of violence, but that the images, some positive also, were directly related to what I was saying.
So I guess I just like, go ahead, Leslie, you take it.
My questions may be stupid, and I apologize ahead of time. I just jumped in here and didn't know what was going on. So I don't know your music at all. So my first question in listening to you speak is, so in these videos, are the people that are shown in the videos, are they named? Like, do we know who the violence is being perpetrated against?
There are only 2 videos that I've made that are using this type of footage, and no, their names are not included.
Okay, so with that being said, I don't have a problem with anybody showing anything, but if you're trying to make an impact and trying to do a story, I would think having the person's names that are in the videos that you're showing, I think that would be a bit more impactful. And if you're doing this to try to make a change, I would think you would do it with an active story to try to help somebody actively who has issues. And I'm going to bring it back to me again. You don't know this about me, but I'm currently sporting a broken shoulder right now from a cop from 3 years ago, and I can't get any help because they say that the injury wasn't violent enough. And with what's going on today, even people being killed, it's not violent enough. So if you're going to try to make music that specifically is to make a change, then I would think you would try to make a specific change with that music. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but you know, a song or a music video isn't going to make change on its own. It's meant to lend itself to a movement, to a greater movement. And in addition, you know, I use whatever small celebrity I have from making music to fight on behalf of people like yourself. So those who follow me on Twitter know that I use my Twitter to tell stories, and not just the ones that are trending, about people who are wrongfully incarcerated, about people who have experienced police brutality, people who are wrongfully arrested. And so the more people who know about me and who know about 10 Demands, you know, through the song, you know, the more people we have who have learned about abolition, and the more people are able to see the cases of people who are currently in need, like you're talking about.
Well, I get that, but it still seems a little bit abstract to me. I mean, I get your point, but to me, it would seem better, more impactful, more important if you did use somebody real and tried not only to make a larger statement, but fought for someone individually with your music. And that would actually bring a greater story to you and your music. If your specific music and your specific song helped this person, then you could kind of piggyback onto that with the bigger abstract of what you're trying to do. At least that's what my head is saying.
So
and again, I could be insane.
No, you're certainly not insane. And I really took to heart the first thing you said about including people's names who've been featured. I think that is missing. That would have definitely at least done something, like I try to do on Twitter, say their name, right? Like that's a hashtag for a reason.
Right.
And so that's a really great point. When it comes to making a song for a specific person, I don't make 100 songs a week or a year. I make a couple songs a year. And so the biggest issue I would have in doing what you're saying is, how do I decide who gets that song? Why would any individual's case be more important than someone else's? So I have a lot more time to write articles and a lot more time to push specific stories through social media. So whenever a story comes to me that I research and identify as a story that I believe should be told to a greater audience, I do that. And because of my somewhat larger audience, that person is able to get closer to the justice that they are seeking. Whereas a song that its purpose is different. It's trying to encompass all of those stories that I'm trying to tell every day.
Listen, you are someone who, you've mentioned like your work in hip hop is not really for profit, and you are in marketing professionally. I'm also marketing professionally. What do you feel like Ten Demands needs to do over the course of the next year? In terms of whether it's fundraising, like how close are you to your goals? Do you want to go beyond flyers? What is it that you feel like that organization needs to do next year?
Well, fundraising is not even close to a priority for us. That's why all the funds that I've raised from the 10 Demands song have gone directly to Black Lives Matter and the movement for Black Lives. And
how much was that?
Just a few $100 so far. And I've been, and I've had people tell me, well, that's a mistake. You need to target a specific local charity. Who knows where that money's going? Sure, I hear you. But then I'm more closely back to that question from before about who I'm writing a song for. How do I choose a local charity? And what about all of the others? I want to put my faith in the leading Black organizations to make those decisions. It shouldn't really be me who makes that choice. So that's why that money is going there. We do have the ongoing GoFundMe for 10 Demands, and we haven't taken any money out of it. The only money that we've used to print flyers has been from a private donation, an anonymous donation. And we certainly would like to get more flyers to more protesters. Logistically, that's a lot harder than what is my focus right now, which is the emails. Email campaigns could conceivably be more effective and are certainly easier because you're not requiring printing, distribution, someone picking up those flyers, that person then being entrusted with distributing those flyers, and all of that stuff. With the emails, I'm going to send an email, I'm going to write an email that we at 10 Demands sends out to all of these people and create a template so that once we've made it publicly available, anyone who wants to email their person in particular can do so. To me, like, that's the focus for now from a kind of, strategic, actual action.
Are you talking about emails to send to your local representatives or your representatives? I don't understand what you mean by an email.
Well, we would be starting with senators and congresspeople, okay. And then going to the state level, and then going to mayors and council members. It takes a lot of work, and we're a really small group right. Collecting all of those addresses, which is why we're starting at the top as opposed to the other way. It's just a matter of feasibility. And then, as far as priorities for the group, in terms of spreading the message further, I think ideally collaborating more with other abolitionist groups. There have been a lot of people only on social media, not in the real world, but on social media, who have made it their mission for some reason to try to attack us and to position, most likely because I am a face, right, that we've talked about already, like doing these interviews, to position me as some puppet leader with all of these subservience, which is so far from the truth and so destructive and so unhelpful. These aren't right-wing people who are attacking me for this reason. They attack me every day in general. These are supposed allies who are doing everything they can to cause rifts between us and other abolitionist groups. That's something that, we publicly don't respond to for the most part, because it's, bad faith actors wasting their time and hours. But on the other side of things, it would be good to actively reach out more to other abolitionist groups. We could be more powerful if we're better aligned and working together on strategic initiatives. Outside of that, I think just continuing to get more of the other members of this group more publicly out there, because they can share their own experiences about why they helped create 10 demands and why it was important to develop the 10 demands for justice. I can't speak for their own reasons. So that's another big push for me.
So I have sort of a question about this that is not specific to 10 demands, but is sort of just a broad question I would ask anybody who starts a new organization in the left. Like, why start a new organization instead of joining one that exists?
Ours is different. Just like the other 50 abolitionist groups that already exist would say to you. Why was Movement for Black Lives created when Black Lives Matter already existed? It's often a question that I feel is asked to, like, it's one of the questions. Go ahead.
I mean, Movement for Black Lives started because they had strategic disagreements with Black Lives Matter. So yeah, all right. Well, let's talk about what are those things that you guys bring to the table that makes you a unique quantity.
So the two biggest things really are, or some of the biggest things are, one, the most prominent abolitionist movements, I shouldn't say movements, but like websites and recent collectives that are out there, have not incorporated the indigenous community at all. That was one key differentiator for us. While others may support reparations are not part of their demands. And another thing is that some of the others felt to us as, in terms of what we want at the end of the day and why we want it, we're in 100% alignment. And we have always supported the other groups publicly. What we tried to do that we didn't see the other groups doing as much was get into more granular detail about specific laws that we thought needed to be repealed and needed to be passed.
Mm-hmm.
When you talk about like those specific laws, are we talking about local laws?
Well, we couldn't get into without having like a billion-page document, tons of, local laws. In our demands themselves, we focus more on national laws. But a lot of these demands need to be implemented on local levels, like abolishing prisons and abolishing police go hand in hand. But when you're abolishing a police department, you're starting with defunding a department that is, typically a municipal department. So a lot of what we're suggesting is, involves like the ways that you would defund to abolish. And in a lot of ways, they're not that different from what other groups are asking for. But, we just felt that it would cause way more good than harm to add another collective to the movement fighting for abolition. it was important for us, whereas if I had joined a group as an individual, I could have, added my 2 cents, sure, but and that's all I would rightfully do. Whereas by joining with people that I already worked with, other activists that I knew, who I communicated with regularly, we were able to together come up with our set of demands based on conversations that we had with people who weren't necessarily in the abolitionist movement, but were in the criminal justice community, who were just, former prisoners, I say formerly incarcerated people, again, people from the First Nations, that we did not believe were necessarily, a part of the decision-making in other instances.
Now, can I ask if this was already brought up, I apologize, then you can just briefly tell me, but when you're talking about reparations, what do you feel reparations, or how are you presenting what you think that reparations should be?
Well, just to be clear, it's not me. So what 10 Demands is asking for are reparations for all descendants of Africans in America, as well as all descendants of the First Nations. The demands for each are slightly different. They both include a formal apology. They both, a public apology. They both include, financial reparations. And, the way that they differ is that, the indigenous communities are looking for sovereignty and looking for the passing of all treaties that have either been, like the actual implementation of all treaties that have either been passed and not acted on or were not passed. Whereas for African Americans, that those issues are not part of it. But so we go into further detail, within that demand for reparations that distinguishes, based on, which people we're talking about. But, it includes, passing the Commission to Study Reparation Act, HR 40 and S 1083. It includes mandates for Congress. So it is pretty comprehensive. But another thing about our demands is that we are constantly receiving feedback and making changes. The version that you see on the website today is not exactly the same as the one that we came out with, because we understand that as 10 people, we don't have all the answers. So when we hear from a source that, gives us reason to make a change, we vote on that. And if we are in agreement by a majority, we implement that change.
Okay.
I listened to you talk like at very great depth about having conversations when it came out to building a comprehensive platform. Mm-hmm. So I want to talk about how do you have those conversations when it comes to who is a voting member in your organization? You've obviously had a lot of drama like over the last few months about people coming in and having falling outs and leaving. And there's discord. Also, us as a group, I know sometimes we will bring people on our show and have them work with us that we've just kind of met out of the blue. Literally, Danny was here on our debate show, and I don't think we'd ever spoken before. We literally liked their Twitter feed and talked to them once, and they were like on the show. I can think of that for a couple of people who we kind of hang out with. If I'm on Twitter and I type in fuck 12, I find like 20 people who are, and this is not saying you should go away in shame, but just in terms of building the organization and the people who are doing the labor, I might run into like 50 people who are eloquent and spokespeople about this subject. And as you're looking to build that decision making about how the organization works and build a consensus around that, how do you guys find a place on this spectrum behind having maybe had bad experience in the past and also wanting to be a group that's upward looking and is talking about sharing the platform and helping people in that way? How do you balance those things?
Yeah,
both individually and maybe as a group.
You know, how I think that we all are in agreement about how we were in agreement about how we wanted to do it, and we're in agreement now about how we are doing it. So it's not anything from me specifically. Initially, we were a bigger group, and we were open to bringing on more people, like very open. We were eager to do that. You know, one of the members of the group, we found out had been involved in pretty reprehensible behavior online, and we asked him to leave. And so he departed. Someone else who was one of the initial members, who was not even there by the time that we launched, chose to leave because we were too radical. A third person, who has been the cause of a ton of the drama around 10 Demands, was offended that we didn't more come to her aid as an organization in her variety of Twitter drama.
Yeah.
But the rest of us in the group made the decision that it wasn't professional to engage in things like that, that we were going to make a statement about David, who behaved that way with women on Twitter. And, you know, if this other person wanted to get into fights, like we could support her as individuals, and we did. I know that I personally made myself available to her. So did Zoya. The people that she's attacked specifically are the ones who were there for her. We initially had an agreement, which is, you know, I have all these pieces of information that I do not share publicly, because to me, that is not how things should be done. You know, we agreed that she would, you know, leave the group. I mean, this was actually something that she offered, but because she was there in the beginning and did help with us, we would keep her on the website. And she agreed to stop creating drama and, you know, telling lies about us.
Respectfully, I don't want to get into specifics of any kind of drama that y'all have had on Twitter, because we don't want to be involved in it. So, like, oh, who said what, who broadcasted what?
Right. So I'll fast forward through that. So the point is that, you know, we that person went back on what the agreement was. She continued to talk about us. We then had 2 volunteers come in, and, you know, we had an ethics policy in place that people had to sign. And, you know, we did not want to immediately bring anyone new on from these 2 initial issues, even if they signed the ethics agreement, because it proved not to hold up, until they were a volunteer for a while and showed that they could be trusted and that they were really in it for the right reasons, and all of these things. And so to this day, you know, given the experiences we've had with our first 2 volunteers leaving and then lying about us and trashing us, we now continue to have about 10 volunteers who do things that they are interested in doing, whether it's promoting things on social media or helping collect emails for this distribution list. You know, it is up to them how much they want to be a part of it and how much they want to contribute, but they are not part of our strategy meetings. We have not felt comfortable since these initial issues with bringing anyone into the core group where, you know, key decisions are made. However, we have now launched like an onboarding process and orientation that the volunteers can take part in. So we are trying to get back to the point where we can expand the group safely. We've experienced enough shady behavior that we have to be careful, because it's you know, it's limited our ability to be effective.
Rachel, you and I are both organizers, and we both dealt with many personality issues.
Yeah.
Just in your own vision, where do we draw the line between, like, we've been burnt before and we want to kind of, you know, set the swallow up, or we're researching, we're finding ideas, and all the ideas are being filtered through ourselves and our own ways of thinking, and we try to, and this is something we've both struggled with, kind of building new neural pathways in our organization. How do we find that balance?
So to clarify what you're asking me, how do we sort of solve the problem of speaking to other people's traumas? Or how do we solve the problem of like trusting people and building like a big tent?
Exactly. How do we decide how many people to trust in our organization? How high should that moat be? Because I mean, you've got a situation with AWK, who's like the comms person for this organization, and maybe is the only person that's comfortable doing it at the moment, but also is having all of these other situations that come up and personal attacks against him. How do we both have that and we're trying to solve two problems at once, basically.
Right. Well, I mean, optics are real, right? Optics are a serious consideration.
Sure.
Like, we've talked about optics a bunch of different times in terms of like, how will it look if I do this, or if you do this, or like, even before like this interview, we were talking with Brandon and we were saying like, okay, Brandon, we're going to let you take the lead here because this is like your trauma that we're talking about, and sort of being very intentional about where power dynamics lie, but when it comes to like OPSEC, when it comes to like controlling like the behavior.
Leslie, you're muted. Would you?
Oh.
Sorry, Rachel, you're doing it again.
What am I doing?
You're throwing out words and acronyms that are flying right over my head.
When you're talking about security, when you're talking about controlling who knows what about the organization and who has a voice in the conversation, right? You can either have good security and good control, or you can have a mass movement, and you can't really do both. And it's one of those things where every step of the way, every time you add more people, to a certain extent, you are necessarily compromising that security. And honestly, I don't think either one is like inherently better or worse. Like, small organizations can be highly, highly effective. Big tent organizations can get big things done, but like, that's just which problems do you want to have, right? Because you're gonna have problems no matter what.
Just to clarify, though, we have never hidden anything. There is not a single truth or experience from day one to today in how 10 Demands has run or anything that the members of 10 Demands are not open to discussing. We weren't trying to be secure to protect group secrets. There are no secrets. The problem we ran into is people coming into our group and doing things that had nothing to do with like, witnessing something and then talking about it. They literally made things up. They literally said things happened that didn't. They like came into the group and immediately tried to change the subject and get us to attack other people. Like, crazy things happened that I never experienced in any activist organization outside of the internet. This is all new to me and has only happened to me online.
Yeah. Well, the online is bad. It brings out the worst in all of us. It makes everyone unhappy. And as a related note, it also makes us money sometimes, occasionally at Not Safe for Walks. Not enough that we are in the black by any means. We're still spending a lot of money on it. But, hypothetically speaking, if you're watching this and you would like to give us some money.
Yeah. Patreon.com/notsafe.
That's right.
That'll take us in for $5. You can get access to our post shows, hang out with us a little bit extra. And we're just always roaring on YouTube. There's like new stuff dropping every day. Hot Girl Agenda drops tomorrow at 6 p.m. Just things are just always happening. I think
you're very excited about Hot Girl Agenda. You'll be excited to hear that Rara visited me for this Friday's episode of Bitch Brunch, which is at the regular time at 4.
That's right.
I don't have a Patreon, and I highly recommend, if you have the money, to invest in theirs.
Yeah,
nice.
I'm a big fan of all the stuff that you do, and I appreciate you asking me the hard questions.
Yeah, I appreciate you took it really well. We had to talk ahead of time. Like, if we're going to ask these hard questions, it's going to depend on how he responds.
Yeah.
But, I think you clearly are thinking about these issues, and I appreciate that. It's good to know that you're not just sort of blithely doing it and not caring,
No, I don't think I'd be doing any of this if I didn't care. I mean, I think, I caring too much has really always been my problem. I've had emotional and, for real though, like I've had.
I know, but it does sound funny. You will acknowledge that it does sound funny.
Yeah, it's like if you have to tell people you
I care too much. That is funny.
Well, it's caused me, I have not, like, I've been really close to not surviving on many occasions. I am on tons of medications because I feel everything, not just the injustice in the world, but everything in my day-to-day life. I feel everything's stronger than most people. My mom, who's passed away, told me when I was 2 months old, she knew there was something wrong with me. And as soon as I found injustice that was bigger than me, it became a whole new thing to obsess over. So I do this at my own expense. And so it does, I do take it personally when people attack me for things that aren't accurate. I also take it personally when people provide constructive criticism like Leslie did, and say, question me about my motives and other ways to do things better, because that's my goal, is to do it the best way and to be an ally without stepping on anyone's toes. But the talk, the death threats that I get from fascists, I laugh off and just try to protect my data and my children. But like I've said, like when supposed allies say things about me that aren't true or dox me to put my children's lives at risk, that I feel really strongly.
Yeah, doxing people is always bad.
Leslie, you have written a book. Can you talk about it?
Yes, it's called Forgotten Tomorrow's Crazy Todays, and it's available on Amazon. And It is a 5-year story of me becoming caregiver in my home to my father, his mother long distance, while I was a wife and a mother and a stand-up comedian. And in the midst of the 5-year story, my mom's dad got diagnosed and wanted to come live with me. And it's all of that with my twisted sense of humor.
Holy shit.
I love that. And you can go on Amazon and just type in Leslie Martin and the book title, and you'll get right there, which is very cool.
Did that just come out? Was that recent?
I originally published it with a small publisher in 2007, and then they went under. And so then I republished it by myself in 2010.
Are there do you sell physical copies of the book? Like if I were to come to your house, do you have like a pile of them?
No, I have this one, which I stole from my husband.
That's cool.
He hasn't finished reading yet. But no, the way it's published on demand on Amazon. So if you have Amazon Prime Unlimited, you can read it for free. But if not, I want to say the Kindle version is like $1.99, but you can also get a paperback like the one I have here. And I believe it's $14.99. And I give pretty much I've been giving all of the proceeds to charity because I haven't sold very many, but I promise to give half of my all proceeds to charity.
Leslie, now that you have clout, you've been on a podcast of Awkward. It's time for you to tour that book and your next one, which has been 80% finished for a while. You might want to.
I actually have a name for it. It's going to be called The Search for Butterflies.
I love that, and it's very beautiful. It's very poetic. So everybody, thank you for watching. It's been a good time. We'll be back. We'll do stuff on Wednesday, and it's just gonna all be good. So we'll see you next time. After a while, bye bye.